The mining colony had been quiet for 3 years. David Park had grown used to the silence of space, the hum of machines, and the distant rumble of drills cutting through asteroid rock. He had been a professor once, teaching languages at a small university in Texas. That life felt like a dream now. Earth was gone, burned by alien fire, and the survivors had scattered across the solar system like seeds in the wind. David was 42 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his hands had grown rough from years of manual labor. But his mind remained sharp. He still remembered the old books, the ancient languages, the patterns that connected all forms of communication. That knowledge had seemed useless in the mining colony. Until today. The alien warship appeared without warning. One moment, the sky was empty. The next, a massive shadow blocked out the stars. The ship was shaped like a curved blade, black as death, with strange lights pulsing along its surface. It was a Velhari vessel. Everyone in the colony knew about the Velhari. They were the conquerors of 17 star systems. Their warriors stood 8 feet tall, covered in hard shells like insects. They had 6 limbs, compound eyes that could see in every direction, and minds that worked faster than any human brain. They had destroyed Earth in 3 days. 3 days to end a civilization that had existed for thousands of years. The colony's alarm systems screamed. People ran for the shelters, grabbing their children, crying out in fear. But David stood still. He watched the ship through the observation window, his heart beating slowly in his chest. He was not brave. He was simply tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid. A voice echoed through the colony's speakers. It was not human. The words were translated by the colony's computer, but they still sounded wrong, like stones grinding together. Humans of this settlement, we require one of your kind. Send a representative to speak with the Queen. You have 1 hour. Failure to comply will result in destruction. The colony's leader, a woman named Susan Miller, called an emergency meeting. 200 people gathered in the main hall, their faces pale with terror. Susan stood on a raised platform, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "We need to send someone," she said. "The Velhari don't make empty threats. If we refuse, they'll kill us all. And if we send someone, they'll kill that person and then kill us anyway," shouted a man from the back. His name was Robert, and he had lost his entire family on Earth. His anger was understandable. Maybe, Susan admitted, but maybe not. The Velhari have taken prisoners before. They study us. They want to understand why we keep fighting. "Then send a soldier," someone else called out. "Someone who can at least put up a fight." But the colony had no soldiers. They had miners, engineers, doctors, and teachers. They had escaped the war, not fought in it. They were survivors, not warriors. David raised his hand. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at him with confusion. David was quiet, kept to himself, rarely spoke at meetings. Most people didn't even know his name. "I'll go," he said simply. Susan frowned. "David, you're a linguist. What can you possibly offer them?" "Understanding," David replied. "I spent 20 years studying how different cultures communicate. The Velhari are not like us, but they still use language. They still have rules, patterns, meanings behind their words. If anyone can figure out what they really want, it might be me." The room erupted in arguments. Some people called David a fool. Others said he was brave. A few suggested drawing lots instead. But in the end, no one else volunteered. No one else wanted to face the alien queen. David returned to his small room and gathered his few belongings. A photograph of his daughter, Lisa, who was sleeping in the children's shelter. A small notebook filled with his observations about the Velhari language. A pen, because he never went anywhere without something to write with. He kissed Lisa's forehead while she slept. She was only 7 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. Her mother had died on Earth, one of the billions who never made it to the evacuation ships. David had carried Lisa through fire and smoke to reach the last transport. He had promised her that everything would be okay. He hoped he would be able to keep that promise. The transport beam hit him without warning. One moment, he was standing in the airlock, waiting. The next, white light surrounded him, and he felt his body being pulled apart and put back together. The sensation was not painful, but it was deeply wrong. Humans were not meant to travel this way. When his vision cleared, David found himself in a room that defied description. The walls were made of crystal that seemed to be alive, shifting, and glowing with inner light. The floor pulsed beneath his feet like a heartbeat. The ceiling stretched upward into darkness, so high that he could not see where it ended. And the room was full of Valhari. Thousands of them stood in perfect rows, their compound eyes reflecting David like broken mirrors. They wore armor made from some kind of organic material, and they carried weapons that looked like extensions of their own bodies. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply watched. At the far end of the room, upon a throne made of fused bone and dark metal, sat the queen. She was enormous. Even sitting, she towered over her warriors. Her shell was darker than the others, almost purple, and covered with strange markings that might have been scars or decorations. Her 6 limbs were folded elegantly, like a spider waiting in its web. Her eyes were larger than dinner plates, and they focused on David with an intelligence that made him feel like an insect himself. Her voice did not come from her mouth. It appeared directly in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. The sensation was like having someone else's thoughts pushed into his brain. "Human, you will answer." David took a deep breath. His legs were shaking, but he forced them to be still. His voice was steady when he spoke. "I will try. Your species is weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your technology is primitive. Your worlds fell easily. Your armies were swept aside like dust." David said nothing. Everything she said was true. And yet, the queen continued, her mental voice dropping to something almost soft. "Your kind has done something that no other species in 17 conquered systems has ever accomplished." David waited. His heart pounded in his chest. "You killed a Valhari warlord, one of my most powerful commanders. He had never been defeated in 600 cycles of war. His name was Kethrix, and he was legend among my people." The queen leaned forward on her throne. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Explain how this happened. Explain how 53 of your weakest soldiers killed a god." David's mind raced. The Battle of Europa Station. He had heard the stories, like everyone else. Commander Grace Lee and her volunteers. The last stand that had become humanity's only legend in this hopeless war. He opened his mouth to answer, but the words would not come. Because the truth was, he didn't know. No one knew. The survivors had all died in the weeks that followed, and the recordings had been lost. But he would have to find an answer. His life and the lives of everyone in the colony depended on it. The queen's eyes burned into him, waiting. David stood in the throne room, surrounded by thousands of alien warriors, facing a queen who wanted answers he did not have. His mind searched desperately for something to say. The Battle of Europa Station was famous among humans, but famous did not mean understood. He decided to start with what he knew. "I was not there," David admitted. "I cannot tell you exactly what happened. But I knew the woman who led that fight. Her name was Grace Lee." The queen's massive head tilted slightly. "We recovered her body after the battle. We dissected it, studied every cell, examined every organ. We found nothing special, no genetic changes, no machine parts, no hidden weapons, just meat and bone and blood. That's all we are, David said quietly. Then how? The Queen's mental voice thundered through his skull like a storm. Kethrix was undefeated for 600 of your years. His armor could stop plasma fire. His reflexes were faster than light. His tactical mind had crushed 100 human battalions. 53 of your weakest soldiers should have been nothing to him. Dust, shadows, they should have died in seconds. David closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered Grace Lee. She had been his student many years ago, before the war, before everything fell apart. She had been quiet in class, always sitting in the back row, always taking notes in a small red notebook. But when she spoke, her words cut through all the noise. She had asked him once, during a lecture about ancient war poetry, what made people willing to die for something. David had given her the textbook answer, talking about duty and honor and love of country. Grace had shaken her head. That's not it, she had said. People don't die for ideas. They die because they're angry. Because someone took something from them, and dying is the only way to take something back. David opened his eyes. The Queen was still watching him, waiting. You don't understand humans, he said slowly. You see our weakness, our fragile bodies, our short lives, our primitive weapons. But you're missing something important. Then explain. We have a word for it. We call it spite. The Queen was silent. David continued, his voice growing stronger. Grace Lee knew she was going to die. All 53 of her soldiers knew. The math was simple. There was no plan that ended with them surviving. Your warlord had killed thousands of humans. He had never lost a single battle. Fighting him was suicide. David took a step forward. The guards around the throne shifted, their weapons rising. But the Queen raised one of her limbs, and they went still. But here's what you don't understand about my kind. When a human truly accepts that they're going to die, when they stop hoping for survival, something changes inside them. Fear goes away. Calculation goes away. All the careful thinking that keeps us alive. All the instincts that tell us to run, to hide, to surrender, they just stop. That makes no sense, the Queen said. Fear exists to preserve life. It is the most basic function of any thinking creature. Exactly. But Grace and her soldiers weren't trying to preserve their lives anymore. They had already given those up. They were trying to make their deaths mean something. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to hurt you, to make you feel pain, to make you remember them. David's voice dropped lower. Grace used to tell me that humans were the universe's angriest species. We hold grudges for generations. We write down the names of our enemies so our children's children can hate them. We build monuments to our defeats so we never forget the people who hurt us. The Queen's compound eyes flickered with something that might have been interest. Continue. Your warlord Kethrix was stronger than Grace, faster than Grace, smarter than Grace. He had every advantage, but he made one mistake. What mistake? He killed her family. The room seemed to grow colder. David felt the attention of every Valhari warrior focused on him like a weight. Grace's husband was a pilot. Her 2 sons were engineers on a space station near Mars. Kethrix destroyed that station during his campaign through the inner planets. He didn't even notice. To him, it was just another target, another number in his long list of victories. David's hands had curled into fists without him realizing it. But Grace noticed. She watched the recordings. She saw the station explode. She saw the escape pods get shot down one by one. She knew exactly how her family died. And this made her fight better? No, it made her stop caring about anything except killing Kethrix. She studied his tactics for months. She learned how he thought, how he moved, how he fought. She found the one weakness in his strategy. The Queen leaned forward. What weakness? Arrogance. Kethrix was so used to winning that he had forgotten how to be careful. He always led the final charge himself, always wanted the glory of the kill. Grace knew he would come to Europa Station personally when he thought the battle was won. David smiled grimly. She let him win. She ordered her soldiers to fall back, to look like they were breaking. She waited until Kethrix walked into the command center to claim his victory. And then she set off the bombs. Bombs? The entire station was rigged to explode. Grace had spent weeks hiding charges in the walls, the floors, the ceiling. She turned Europa Station into the largest trap in human history. When Kethrix stepped inside, she sealed the doors and lit the fuse. The Queen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her mental voice was quieter. Our analysis showed that the explosion killed Kethrix instantly. His armor was useless at point-blank range. But Grace Lee was inside the station as well. She knew the explosion would kill her too. Yes, she sacrificed herself to kill one commander. This is not logical. We have many commanders. Killing one changes nothing. David shook his head. You still don't understand. Grace didn't care about strategy. She didn't care about winning the war. She cared about one thing only: revenge. He looked up at the Queen, meeting those enormous compound eyes without fear. That's what spite means. It means hurting someone even when it costs you everything. It means refusing to surrender even when fighting is hopeless. It means looking at a god and saying, "You might kill me, but I'm going to make you bleed first." The Queen was silent for a long time. The warriors around the room stood frozen, their weapons still raised, their eyes still watching. Finally, the Queen spoke. We have conquered 17 star systems. We have defeated species with greater technology, larger armies, more resources. We have faced enemies who were smarter, faster, stronger. She rose from her throne, and David felt the floor tremble beneath her weight. But none of them were like you. None of them kept fighting after they were beaten. None of them built bombs inside their own homes. None of them smiled while they died. She descended the steps toward David, each footfall sending shockwaves through the crystal floor. She stopped just a few feet away from him, so close that he could see his own reflection in her eyes. I have a question for you, human, and I want you to answer honestly. David swallowed hard. Ask. If I offered you peace, if I promised to leave your species alone forever, what would you do? David thought about the question. He thought about Lisa sleeping in the shelter. He thought about the survivors in the colony, living in fear. He thought about all the humans scattered across the solar system, hiding, waiting to die. I would accept, he said. And then what? Would you forget what we did to your world? Would you forgive us? David was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a small, sad sound. No, we would never forget. We would never forgive. We would smile and shake hands and sign treaties. And then we would spend the next 1,000 years building weapons, teaching our children to hate you, waiting for the day when we were strong enough to make you pay. The Queen's mandibles spread wide. It might have been a smile. Yes, that is exactly what I thought you would say. The Queen stood before David, her massive form blocking out the light from the crystal walls. He could feel the heat coming off her body, could hear the soft clicking of her internal organs working beneath that dark shell. She was studying him like a scientist studies an interesting insect. Tell me more about your kind, she said. I have read your histories, watched your recordings, analyzed your behavior patterns. But data is not understanding. I want to know what humans feel. David considered the question. It was strange, standing here in an alien throne room, having a philosophical conversation with a creature who had destroyed his homeworld. But strange had become normal in the years since Earth fell. What do you want to know? Pain, the Queen said. Your species experiences pain more intensely than any other we have encountered. Your nervous systems are designed to maximize suffering. This seems like a flaw. Why did you evolve this way? David thought about it. Pain teaches us, he said finally. When something hurts, we remember it. We learn to avoid it. A child who burns their hand on a fire never forgets that lesson. But your pain continues, even when there is nothing to learn. We have observed humans experiencing pain for years, decades, from injuries that cannot be healed. This serves no purpose. Maybe not, but it reminds us that we're alive. Pain tells us that something matters, that something is wrong, that we need to fight. The Queen made a sound that might have been curiosity. And love? Your species is obsessed with this concept. You write songs about it, fight wars over it, destroy yourselves for it. Explain this to me. David smiled sadly. Love is harder to explain. It's the opposite of logic. When you love someone, their happiness becomes more important than your own. Their survival matters more than yours. You would walk through fire for them, die for them, kill for them. This is inefficient. It creates weakness. Maybe, but it also creates strength. A human fighting for themselves will eventually give up. A human fighting for someone they love will never stop. The Queen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked her next question. Tell me about Jenny Kim. David's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected to hear that name. You know about her? We know about all of your heroes, the Queen said. We study them carefully. Grace Lee killed our warlord. Jenny Kim destroyed our refueling station near Jupiter. She crashed her own ship directly into it, causing an explosion that killed 3,000 of our workers and delayed our fleet for 4 months. David nodded slowly. Jenny Kim. He had known her too, back on Earth. She had been a physicist at the same university where he taught languages. She was brilliant in a way that made other smart people feel stupid. She could solve equations in her head that took computers hours to process. But she had also been awkward, shy, terrible at understanding social situations. Jenny was not a soldier, David said. She was a scientist. She spent her whole life studying stars, trying to understand how they worked. She never wanted to fight anyone. Then why did she die killing our workers? Because she calculated the odds. David's voice was soft. When your fleet destroyed the Mars colonies, Jenny was on a research ship nearby. She watched it happen. She saw the recordings of people dying, families being torn apart, children screaming. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Jenny ran the numbers. She figured out that if your fleet reached Earth on schedule, 7 billion people would die. But if she could delay you, even by a few months, the evacuation ships would have time to save a few million more. So she sacrificed herself for a small percentage gain? It wasn't small to her. Every life saved was a victory. Every child who escaped was worth dying for. The Queen's eyes flickered. This is what confuses me about your species. You understand mathematics. You understand that one life is worth less than 3,000 lives. And yet your hero killed 3,000 of my people to save strangers she had never met. That's because humans don't think in numbers, David said. We think in faces. Jenny didn't see statistics when she looked at Earth. She saw individual people. She saw children playing in parks. She saw old couples holding hands. She saw teenagers falling in love for the first time. He met the Queen's gaze directly. Every human life is a universe to us. When one person dies, an entire world of memories and dreams and hopes dies with them. That's why we fight so hard. That's why we never give up. The Queen turned away from him, walking slowly toward a large window that looked out at the stars. David could see his mining colony in the distance, a tiny dot of light against the blackness. I have studied many species, the Queen said, her mental voice thoughtful. The Kalmari of the 7th system were 10 times more intelligent than humans. They calculated every possible outcome, planned for every contingency. We defeated them in 6 weeks. She continued. The Branthari of the 12th system were 10 times stronger than humans. Their warriors could tear our armor apart with their bare hands. We defeated them in 3 weeks. She turned back to face David. But your species has held out for 3 years. You have no special intelligence, no special strength, no special technology. And yet you keep fighting. You keep surviving. You keep hurting us. Is that why you brought me here? To understand why we won't die? No. The Queen's voice changed, becoming something almost gentle. I brought you here because I need your help. David blinked. Of all the things he had expected to hear, this was not one of them. My help? I'm nobody. I'm a linguistics professor who became a minor because the university doesn't exist anymore. What could I possibly help you with? You can help me understand. The Queen moved closer, her massive form casting a shadow over David. You can explain something that has been troubling me for many cycles. What? Why am I so afraid of your species? The words hung in the air between them. David felt his heart pounding in his chest. The Queen of the Velhari, the ruler of 17 conquered systems, the destroyer of worlds, was afraid of humans? You have better technology, David said slowly. You have more soldiers. You have more ships. You've beaten us in every major battle. Why would you be afraid? Because of what happens next. The Queen's voice was soft, almost sad. We have conquered many species. After we defeat them, they accept their fate. They become part of our empire. They stop fighting. They forget their old ways and learn ours. She shook her head slowly. But humans are different. Even after you lose, you don't stop. You hide in asteroids and plot revenge. You teach your children to hate us. You build weapons in secret. You smile at us while planning our destruction. David said nothing. Everything she said was true. I have seen the future, the Queen continued. I have calculated the possibilities. If we leave you alone, you will grow strong again. You will build new ships, new weapons, new armies. And in 100 years or 1,000 years, you will come for us. Yes, David admitted. We will. And if we destroy you completely, wipe out every human in the galaxy, what then? David thought about it. Then you will have made the biggest mistake of your existence. Because somewhere, somehow, one human will survive. And that human will dedicate their entire life to making you pay. And their children will do the same. And their grandchildren. Until one day, someone succeeds. The Queen was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that David had not heard before. That is exactly what I was afraid you would say. David stood in silence, watching the Queen move through the crystal throne room. She walked slowly, her 6 limbs clicking against the floor in a rhythm that felt almost musical. The thousands of Velhari warriors remained frozen in their positions, their compound eyes following their ruler with absolute devotion. Finally, the Queen stopped before the great window again. The stars stretched out before her like an endless ocean of light. Do you know how old I am, human? She asked. David shook his head. No, I have lived for 2,000 of your years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars burn out and new ones take their place. I have led my people through 17 conquests, always expanding, always growing stronger. She turned to face him, and David saw something in her eyes that surprised him. Weariness. The Queen of the Velhari looked tired. And in all that time, I have learned one truth. The greatest danger to any empire is not its enemies. It is itself. David frowned. I don't understand. Of course you don't. Your species is young, still fighting for survival. still hungry for growth. But we have reached the end of our expansion. There are no more systems to conquer nearby, no more enemies to defeat. And without enemies, my people are destroying themselves. The Queen's voice carried a weight of sorrow that David had not expected. My warriors were bred for battle. Their bodies are weapons, their minds are trained for war. When there is no war, they do not know how to exist. They fight each other instead. They form factions, plot against one another, challenge my authority. She gestured toward the warriors standing in the room. Look at them. Perfect soldiers. Perfect killing machines. And utterly lost without a purpose. David began to understand. Your empire is falling apart. Slowly, yes. I can hold it together for another few hundred years, perhaps. But eventually, my children will tear each other apart. The Valhari will destroy ourselves from within, just as every great empire before us has done. She moved closer to David, lowering her massive head until her eyes were level with his. This close, he could see the intricate patterns on her shell, the small scars from ancient battles, the wisdom of 2,000 years carved into every line. I need a solution, she said. I need something to give my people purpose again. Something to unite them, to focus their energy, to remind them why they exist. David felt a chill run down his spine. You want an enemy. Yes. And you want that enemy to be us. Yes. The word hung in the air between them. David's mind raced, trying to understand what the Queen was truly saying. You've already beaten us, he said slowly. Earth is gone. Our colonies are scattered. We can barely survive, let alone fight a war against the Valhari Empire. That is true today. But I do not think in terms of today. I think in terms of centuries, millennia. And I have seen what your species is capable of. The Queen straightened to her full height. You are survivors. You adapt. You learn. You grow stronger with every defeat. The same qualities that make you so difficult to destroy also make you the perfect long-term enemy. David laughed bitterly. So you want to keep us alive just so you can keep fighting us? More than that. I want to help you grow stronger. The words shocked David into silence. He stared at the Queen, waiting for her to explain. Think about it, human. Right now, you are barely clinging to existence. A few thousand survivors in scattered colonies, mining asteroids for scraps, hiding from our patrols. You are no threat to anyone. She began walking in a slow circle around David, her eyes never leaving him. But imagine if I gave you technology. Ships better than anything you have ever built. Weapons that could actually hurt us. Knowledge of other species, other systems, other possibilities. Why would you do that? Because I want a fair fight. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. I want an enemy that can truly challenge us, that can push us to become better, stronger, more united. An enemy that will never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting. David shook his head in disbelief. You're insane. You want to make us stronger so we can kill more of your people? I want to give my people a reason to exist. War is what we understand. Battle is what we live for. Without it, we are nothing. The Queen stopped in front of David again. And I have seen the alternative. I have seen what happens when empires grow too comfortable, too safe, too peaceful. They rot from the inside. Their warriors become soft. Their leaders become corrupt. Their people forget why they fought in the first place. She leaned closer. I would rather see my people die fighting humans than watch them slowly decay into nothing. David was silent for a long moment. His mind was spinning with the implications of what the Queen was proposing. An endless war between humans and Valhari. Generations of fighting. Millions of deaths on both sides. Also, the Valhari could have something to live for. What about us? He asked finally. What do we get out of this? Arrangement? Survival, the Queen said simply. I will not destroy your colonies. I will not hunt down your scattered people. Instead, I will let you rebuild. I will give you space to grow. I will even give you weapons and technology to speed your development. In exchange for what? In exchange for war. Controlled war. Limited war. Enough conflict to keep both our people strong, but not enough to truly destroy either side. David's jaw tightened. You're talking about killing people. My people. As part of some kind of game. I am talking about giving both our species purpose. Your people fight best when they have something to fight against. So do mine. We can be that for each other. She reached out one of her limbs and touched David's shoulder. The contact was surprisingly gentle. I am not asking you to like this arrangement. I am not asking you to forgive what we have done to your world. I am simply asking you to consider the alternative, which is extinction. If my empire falls apart, the factions that emerge will be far less controlled than I am. Some will want to destroy humanity completely. Others will want to enslave you. The war that follows will be chaos with no rules, no limits, no hope of survival for your kind. She released his shoulder and stepped back. But if you accept my offer, I can guarantee that humanity survives. Diminished, yes. Fighting for generations, yes. But alive. And growing stronger. David thought about his daughter Lisa, sleeping in the colony shelter. He thought about the 200 survivors who had trusted him to represent them. He thought about all the humans scattered across the solar system, hiding, hoping, waiting to see what would happen. I can't make this decision alone, he said. Of course not. I will give you time to consult with your people. But understand, human, that time is limited. My empire grows more unstable with every passing cycle. If I cannot offer my people a solution soon, I will lose control entirely. She walked back toward her throne, ascending the steps with the grace of a creature that had ruled for millennia. You have one cycle to decide. Return to your colony, speak with your leaders, and give me an answer. David nodded slowly. And if we say no? The Queen settled onto her throne, her eyes glittering in the crystal light. Then I will do what I must to save my people. I will destroy your colonies, harvest your genetic material, and create artificial humans to fight against. Clones bred for war, stripped of the qualities that make you so difficult. But those wouldn't be real humans. No, and they would never fight as well as you do. But they would be better than nothing. David understood. The Queen wanted real humans because fake ones wouldn't satisfy her people. The Valhari needed to fight something that could actually hurt them, something that could make them feel alive. One cycle, he said. I'll have an answer for you. The transport beam activated without warning, pulling David apart and putting him back together somewhere else. When his vision cleared, he was standing in the mining colony's airlock, exactly where he had started. The door opened, and Susan Miller was waiting for him, her face pale with worry. David? What happened? What did they want? David looked at her, then at the crowd of survivors gathered behind her, all waiting to hear his report. Call a meeting, he said quietly. Everyone needs to hear this. The colony's main hall had never been so quiet. 200 people sat in rows of battered metal chairs, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on David as he finished explaining the Queen's offer. No one moved. No one spoke. Susan Miller stood beside him on the small platform, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. When David finished, she cleared her throat. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. The alien queen who destroyed our homeworld wants us to fight a never-ending war against her people. And in exchange, she give us technology and let us survive. That's the basic idea, yes. Robert, the angry man who had lost his family on Earth, stood up from his seat. His face was red with fury. "This is insane. We should tell her to go to hell. We should refuse, we should fight. We should do anything except make a deal with the monsters who killed 7 billion of our people." A woman named Angela, one of the colony's doctors, raised her hand. "And if we refuse, what happens then?" "Then she destroys us," David said simply. "Or worse, she clones us. Creates artificial humans to fight against. She gets her war either way. The only question is whether real humans survive to be part of it." The room erupted in arguments. Some people agreed with Robert, insisting that any deal with the Velhari was a betrayal of everyone who had died. Others were more practical, pointing out that survival was more important than pride. A few suggested trying to escape, to hide somewhere the Queen would never find them. David listened to all of it, letting people speak, letting them process their emotions. He understood their anger. He felt it too. Finally, an old man named William stood up. He was one of the oldest survivors in the colony, nearly 80 years old, with white hair and hands that trembled with age. He had been a teacher on Earth, specializing in human history. "May I say something?" he asked. The room fell silent. There was something about William's calm voice that commanded respect. "I have studied our history for my entire life," William said. "I have read about every war, every conflict, every terrible thing that humans have done to each other. And do you know what I've learned?" He paused, looking around the room. "We survive. That's what we do. We survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We survived atomic bombs and climate disasters and the collapse of civilizations. We survived because we adapted, because we made difficult choices, because we did whatever was necessary to keep going." He turned to face David directly. "The Queen is offering us a deal. It's not a good deal. It's not a fair deal. But it's a deal that lets us survive. And as long as we survive, there's hope." Robert shook his head. "Hope for what?" "Hope to keep dying in an endless war. Hope to grow stronger," William replied. "Hope to learn their technology, their weaknesses, their secrets. Hope to become something that the Queen can't control, can't predict, can't defeat." He smiled grimly. "She thinks she's using us. She thinks she can keep us as pet enemies, fighting just enough to keep her empire together, but never strong enough to truly threaten her. But she doesn't understand humans as well as she thinks she does." David felt something stir in his chest. William was right. The Queen saw humans as useful tools, as enemies that could be managed and controlled. But humans had never been good at staying controlled. "We accept the deal," David said slowly. "We smile and nod and take her technology and her weapons and her resources. We let her think she's in charge." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person there. "And then we wait. We grow. We learn. We teach our children everything we know about the Velhari, everything we learn from working with them. We build ships in secret places they don't know about. We develop weapons they can't imagine." His voice grew stronger. "And one day, when we're ready, when we're strong enough, we stop playing their game. We take everything they've given us and turn it against them. We finish what Grace Lee started." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, people began to nod. Even Robert, his face still tight with anger, gave a small nod of acceptance. Susan Miller stepped forward. "We'll need to vote. This decision affects everyone, and everyone should have a say." The vote was not unanimous. 37 people voted against the deal, preferring death to cooperation with the enemy. But the majority voted yes. 163 people chose survival, chose hope, chose the long game. David returned to the Velhari ship the next day. The Queen was waiting for him in her throne room, her compound eyes glittering with anticipation. "You have decided," she said. It was not a question. "We accept your offer," David replied. But we have conditions. The Queen's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. You are in no position to demand conditions. And yet I'm demanding them anyway. That's what humans do. The Queen laughed. It was a strange sound, clicking and humming, echoing through the crystal chamber. Very well. Tell me your conditions. First, you will not attack civilian populations. Military targets only. Colonies, cities, homes, they stay off limits. Acceptable. We want worthy enemies, not piles of corpses. Second, you will share your medical technology with us. Our people die from diseases and injuries that your science could easily cure. If you want us to keep fighting, you need to keep us alive. Also acceptable. Healthy enemies fight better. Third, you will allow us to establish new colonies. Not just maintain our existing ones, but expand, grow, build new homes and new systems. The Queen considered this for a moment. Within limits. I will not allow you to grow too quickly. But yes, some expansion will be permitted. David nodded. Then we have a deal. The Queen rose from her throne and descended toward him. She extended one of her limbs, holding it out in a gesture that David recognized. She had studied human customs, learned about handshakes and agreements. He took her limb in his hand and shook it. Her shell was cold and hard against his skin. The Treaty of Distant Suns, the Queen said. That is what we will call this agreement. A pact between two species who will fight each other forever, but never destroy each other completely. Until one of us changes the terms, David said quietly. The Queen's eyes glittered. Yes, until then. 3 months later, the first Velhari technology ships arrived at the human colonies. They brought medical equipment that could cure diseases humans had suffered from for centuries. They brought construction tools that could build in weeks what had taken humans years. They brought weapons that made human soldiers feel like giants for the first time since the war began. The public on both sides believed the war was still real. The border skirmishes continued, carefully orchestrated to look genuine. Soldiers fought and died on both sides. Their sacrifices celebrated as acts of heroism. Only the highest commanders knew the truth. Only a few dozen humans and Velhari understood that the entire conflict was a performance. A carefully managed game designed to keep both species strong. David Park returned to his colony and watched his daughter, Lisa, grow up in a world of controlled conflict. She never knew the full truth. She believed, as most humans did, that they were fighting for survival against an alien empire that wanted to destroy them. And in a way, that belief was more useful than the truth. It kept humans angry. It kept them motivated. It kept them building, learning, growing stronger with every passing year. 20 years after the Treaty of Distant Suns was signed, David Park died in his sleep at the age of 62. His daughter Lisa was at his bedside, holding his hand. "Did we win, Dad?" she asked him in those final moments. David smiled. "Not yet," he whispered. "But we will. Someday we will." He closed his eyes for the last time, content in the knowledge that humanity would survive. Not just survive, but grow. Not just grow, but remember Dodd, and somewhere in the academy on New Houston, a young cadet named Michael Park listened to his instructor describe the legendary last stand of Grace Lee. He was David's nephew, Lisa's cousin, and he had never met the man who had shaped humanity's future. "Remember," the instructor said, "we don't fight because we can win. We fight because something in us refuses to stop. That's what makes us human. That's what the Velhari will never understand." Michael smiled. He understood perfectly. The Velhari understood too. That was the whole point, but understanding and controlling were two different things. The Queen had made a deal with creatures she thought she could manage. She had invited spite into her empire, hoping to harness it. Someday, she would learn what humans did to those who tried to use them. Someday, the games would end, And when they did, humanity would be ready.